Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
The world today has many democratic countries. These are places where people enjoy many rights and freedoms. The United States is often seen as a leading example of democracy. Yet it is important to understand its past. Less than 100 years ago, a large part of its population, about 10 out of every 100 people, lived under very unfair rules. These people were Black Americans. They were forced to ride in separate buses. They could not eat in the same restaurant rooms as white people. Their children had to go to different schools. This system of unfair separation was called racial segregation. Imagine an Olympic champion, a hero who won great honors for his country. But when he came home, a restaurant refused to serve him food. This was not a made-up story. It really happened to the famous boxer Muhammad Ali. He was a celebrated athlete, but because he was Black, he faced open racism and was denied service. This example shows how deep racial discrimination was, even for someone so well known and respected. The United States has a long and complex history. It has moved from a time when slavery was allowed to a period of laws that separated people by race. Then came mass protests by African Americans who fought for their basic rights. Many important events in American history are linked to this struggle for equality. For instance, the Civil War, which took place in the 1860s, is often thought of as a fight to end slavery. In more recent times, we see modern actions like people kneeling during national anthems at sports events. We also see how films and TV shows try to include people from many different backgrounds. All these efforts seem to be about achieving fairness and justice for everyone. However, the real causes behind these changes are often more complicated than they appear. It is easy to think that the world is always moving towards more justice and fairness. But this story will offer another view. It will suggest that neither in the past nor in the present has the world been mainly driven by a search for what is morally right. Instead, it has always been guided by one main thing: money. The desire for wealth, economic power, and profit has been a powerful force. It has shaped major historical events, including those related to race and equality, more than the simple idea of justice. We will look at history through this lens to understand the true motivations behind big decisions and changes. 2. A long time ago. Long ago, slavery was common in many parts of the world. Great buildings like the pyramids in ancient Egypt and the Colosseum in ancient Rome were built by many thousands of enslaved people. These workers had no freedom and were forced to work hard. Their labor was a main part of how economies worked in those old times. But things changed over many years. When the powerful Roman Empire ended, it became hard to control so many enslaved people across large areas. Europe slowly moved to a different system called feudalism. In this system, many former enslaved people became peasants. They worked on the land for powerful lords. They were not owned in the same way as before, but they were still not truly free. Much later, in the year 1607, something new began. A few hundred people from Great Britain traveled across the big ocean. They landed on the shores of North America. They hoped to find much wealth. They thought they would find gold, just like the Spanish had found gold in other parts of America many years before. However, these first English settlers soon saw that there was no easy gold to find in eastern North America. The native people there lived in small groups, and it was not easy to take their land or force them to work. The early colonists realized that their first plan was not working. One of the first settlers, Captain John Smith, wrote a message back to England. He said they did not need more adventurers who only wanted gold. Instead, they needed people with skills. They needed carpenters, farmers, and blacksmiths. These skilled workers were important to build new towns and grow food. At first, these new communities tried to work together and share everything. But this system was not very good. People did not work hard if they saw their harvest given to others who did less. They felt less reason to work from morning until night. The communities often did not have enough food, so they changed their plan. Each family received its own piece of land. This made people work harder to make their own lives better. The goal was still to make money for the colony, but they now understood they needed a strong, reliable workforce to help the new settlements grow and become profitable. 3. The New World and New Workers. After the first settlers arrived in North America, they found no easy gold. They needed skilled workers, not adventurers, to build a new life. In 1612, a farmer named John Rolfe started growing a new kind of tobacco. This tobacco quickly became very popular in England. People wanted more and more of it. Soon, thousands of pounds of tobacco were sent to Europe. The demand was huge, and other settlers began to grow it too. To make a lot of tobacco, plantations needed many hands. They needed a big and cheap labor force. At first, immigrants came to work, but there were never enough. Few people wanted to travel across the ocean to an unknown land. The native peoples of America did not want to work for the settlers. Slavery had mostly ended in Europe, and other parts of the world, like Asia, were too far away or had their own labor problems. So, the settlers looked for another source of workers. Only Africa was left. In August 1619, the first enslaved people arrived from Africa. They were purchased to work on the growing tobacco farms. African tribes often fought among themselves. Sometimes people from one tribe sold their neighbors, who were prisoners of war, into slavery. Also, Africans were used to hard work in hot climates, which was perfect for the plantations. This led to the Atlantic Triangle trade. Ships sailed from Europe with goods like weapons and cloth to Africa. In Africa, these goods were traded for enslaved people. These people were then forced onto ships and taken across the Atlantic Ocean to the plantations in North America. From the colonies, crops like tobacco and sugar were sent back to Europe, completing the triangle. The journey from Africa to America was called the Middle Passage, and conditions were terrible. Hundreds of people were crammed into small spaces below the ship's deck. Each person had very little room, about 180 centimeters long and 50 centimeters wide. They stayed in this position for about 3 months. Many died from a lack of air, illness, or starvation. About 1/5 of the captives did not survive the trip, and their bodies were simply thrown into the ocean. As the trade grew, so did the plantations. By the late 1700s, when the United States became a country, 700,000 enslaved people worked there. This was about 18% of all the people in the new nation. The use of enslaved people had become a vital part of the economy. 4. Two parts of a country. After the United States became its own country, it had two very different parts, the North and the South. In the North, the weather was often cold. It was not easy to use many enslaved people for farm work, especially in winter. Because farming was hard, many people in the North left small villages. They moved to growing cities like New York, Philadelphia, and Boston. In these cities, more factories were built. The North started to become a place of industry. Many northern states began to end slavery slowly. For example, by the year 1790, Virginia, a southern state, had 290,000 enslaved people, but Pennsylvania, a northern state, had only 6,000. The South chose a different way. Enslaved people were very important for the South's money. Plantations worked all year, and many people were needed to do hard manual labor. This system worked well in the South. Around this time, a new crop became very popular: cotton. Before, tobacco was the main crop, but cotton grew quickly. It became the most important material for clothes all over the world. The southern states started to grow a lot of cotton. From the middle of the 1800s until the Second World War, cotton was the main thing America sold to other countries. It made the country a lot of money. To get cotton, workers had to pick about 50 cotton plants by hand for just 100 grams of clean cotton. Imagine big fields of these plants under the hot sun. This was the work for enslaved people in the South. Without them, growing cotton would not make money for the plantation owners. As more cotton was grown, more factories were built in places like Britain and the northern United States to make clothes. These factories needed even more cotton. This meant more enslaved people were forced to work in the cotton fields. The North built its factories, always looking to grow its industry. But the South put all its money into buying more enslaved people. Their entire economy depended heavily on this system. Both parts of the country were growing, yet their ways of making money were very different. These deep economic differences created many problems between them. In the year 1828, the U.S. government decided to put special taxes on goods bought from other countries. These taxes, called tariffs, made imported items much more expensive. The idea was to help the new factories in the North sell their own products by making American goods cheaper than foreign ones. In the next few years, these tariffs became very high, sometimes up to 50% of the product's price. The South suffered the most from these taxes. The Southern states made their money by selling cotton and tobacco to other countries. With the money they earned, they often bought important tools, weapons, and nice clothes from Europe. But because of the new taxes, these European goods cost much more for the Southern people. Even though they were part of the same country, the North and South had such different ideas about money and trade. These big differences meant that a war between them was very likely. The issue of slavery would become important in this big fight, but not for the main reasons many people often believe. 5. The Big War. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln became president. He was a member of the new Republican Party. His policies, especially higher taxes on goods from other countries, were a problem for the Southern states. These taxes made imported items more expensive, which harmed the South's economy. Because of these disagreements, South Carolina left the United States. Soon, 10 other Southern states followed. They created their own country, which they called the Confederate States of America. They chose their own leader and wrote their own laws. The Northern states did not want the country to separate. President Lincoln stated he had no plan to stop slavery in the states where it already existed. His most important goal was to keep the United States together as one nation. The war officially started on April 12, 1861, when Southern forces attacked Fort Sumter. The North believed they would win quickly because they had many factories. However, the South fought with great determination for its independence. Then, the North used a clever plan. They created a naval blockade around the Southern states. This stopped the South from receiving weapons and other supplies from Europe. It also prevented them from selling their important cotton to other countries. This blockade greatly damaged the South's economy. About a year later, Lincoln made another major decision. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This document declared that slaves in the states rebelling against the United States were now free. It did not free slaves in states that were still part of the Union. Lincoln did this to weaken the South's ability to fight. He aimed to take away their workers and encourage them to join the Union Army. This proclamation changed how people around the world viewed the war. It became seen as a fight for freedom, not just a struggle to keep the country united. Many enslaved people escaped from the South and joined the Union Army, which helped the North win. On January 31, 1865, the United States Congress passed the 13th Amendment. This new law officially ended slavery throughout the entire country. This happened more than 250 years after the first English settlers arrived in North America. 6. New rules, old problems. The Civil War ended. On January 31, 1865, the 13th Amendment made slavery illegal in all of the United States. This was a big change, but for many African Americans, life remained very hard. They were free, but they often had no money, no land, and no skills for new jobs. Many had to work for their old masters for very low pay. Others moved to cities, but finding work was still difficult. After Northern soldiers left the Southern states in 1877, new rules started. These were called Jim Crow laws. They created segregation, meaning black and white people were kept separate. Black people had to use different schools, parts of buses, cafes, and hotels. Even Bibles in courts were separate. These laws made black people feel less important and treated unfairly. Life under Jim Crow laws was often dangerous. Black people faced violence. If someone was thought to have done something wrong, a crowd might hurt or kill them. This was called a lynch mob. In 1955, a black teenager named Emmett Till was killed after he supposedly whistled at a white woman. Later, the woman said her story was false. These unfair rules led to the start of the civil rights movement. In 1955, a black woman named Rosa Parks refused to give her bus seat to a white passenger. She was arrested. This made many black people protest. They stopped riding buses for over a year, hurting the bus company's money. A young leader named Martin Luther King Jr. helped organize this protest. Martin Luther King Jr. became a very important voice for civil rights. In 1963, he gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech in Washington. He spoke to a large crowd, asking for a country where everyone was equal. His words gave hope to many. Soon after, the U.S. government passed the Civil Rights Act. This law made segregation illegal in public places. Martin Luther King Jr. also won the Nobel Peace Prize. The Cold War also made the U.S. want to look good as a democracy, pushing for these changes. New rules were made, but old problems of unfairness stayed for a long time. 7. The fight continues today. In 2008, the United States made a truly historic step. Barack Obama was elected president, becoming the country's first black president. This election was very important for many reasons. It showed how much the nation had changed since racial segregation laws ended less than 50 years before. For many people, his election brought a feeling of hope and progress, suggesting that America was moving past its painful racial history. Even his opponent in the election, John McCain, spoke about the importance of the moment, saying that an African American becoming president proved the great chances and possibilities the country offered to all its citizens, no matter their background. However, these changes did not mean that racism disappeared. Unfair treatment and racial hatred continued to be a problem for Black Americans. This was shown by racist messages that sometimes appeared in cities and by ongoing discrimination. A very sad and clear example of this came to light with the death of George Floyd. On May 25, 2020, George Floyd died during an arrest in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He was accused of using a fake money bill. Police officers arrested him, and one officer, Derek Chauvin, knelt on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. During this time, George Floyd could not breathe and repeatedly pleaded for air, saying, "I can't breathe." He died at the scene, and his death was officially ruled a homicide. A video recording of George Floyd's final moments quickly spread online and on television. It was seen by millions of people around the world, causing deep anger and sadness. This video led to a massive wave of protests and riots across the country. People marched in the streets, holding signs and chanting the slogan, "Black Lives Matter." For the entire summer of 2020, protesters and police forces clashed in cities all over the United States. The Black Lives Matter movement grew into a global movement, with demonstrations happening in many countries in Europe and beyond, showing that racial injustice was a concern far outside America's borders. The government began to respond to these widespread calls for change. In 2021, President Joe Biden signed a new law. This law officially made June 19th, known as Juneteenth, a federal holiday. Juneteenth is a very important day because it remembers June 19th, 1865. On that day, enslaved people in Texas, the last Confederate state, finally learned they were free, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. The creation of this holiday was an official way to honor the long struggle for freedom and equality for Black Americans. Even with these steps, people still work every day to end racism and achieve true justice. 8. It is still about money. After hundreds of years, you might think people want only what is right. But a popular saying in America tells us to follow the money to understand what truly happens. It means that many things are still about money. Politicians, for example, often use race to get more votes. During the 2020 election, President Donald Trump tried to get support from African Americans. They usually vote for the other party. He spent more time with famous Black people, like Kanye West, especially when the election was close. Big companies also think about money. In advertising, the best way to be successful is to sell more products. More talk about a company in the news or online, even if it is negative, can be good. This is why companies quickly use ideas of diversity in their marketing. They show people from different races, sometimes in ways that do not fit history. For example, Disney made the Little Mermaid movie with a Black actress. Also, TV shows often show Black actors as old British rich people. There are many such examples today. Another example is Nike. In 2016, a football player named Colin Kaepernick did not stand for the national anthem. He did this to protest against police being bad to black people. He felt he could not respect a country that treated people of color badly. The next year, he lost his job in football. Then Nike saw a chance. In 2018, the company made an advertisement with Kaepernick. It said, "Believe in something, even if it means giving up everything." Some people on social media called for others to stop buying Nike products. But this news helped Nike a lot. Their stock price went down for a short time, but then went very high. Nike made money without changing anything. For businesses, any attention can be good attention. So, the fight for African American rights is often about a lot of money and smart plans. It is not just about good ideas. Even when slavery ended, it was because of political and economic reasons. Today, companies and politicians use race to look good and make more money. This does not mean that doing good is not important. It just means that behind kind words, there is often a plan to make money. Sadly, modern slavery still exists, and it affects people of all colors. In 2016, the UN said that over 40 million people were victims of modern slavery. This includes forced work, where people from poor countries are tricked into bad jobs. They lose their papers and cannot leave. It also includes selling people, mostly women and children. Even with new technology, human workers are still important. Because of this, the problem of slavery will probably stay for many more years. What do you think is the biggest reason behind big changes in history? Money or justice?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.